result of such extensive stakeholder consultations and also the internal research. So hope the report which would be presented subsequently would be very beneficial for the ministry and also for the industry. We hope that this work is taken forward. And now I request the CEO niti aayog his address in the launch of this report.
Thank you, Ishtiaq. First of all, I will compliment the team of niti aayog, our industries division, headed by Ishtiaq, for having worked very hard for over a year to actually finalize the work on the chemical sector and measures required to increase India's both production and participation in the global value chain in the chemical industry. I also thank the Department of Chemicals, Secretary Nivedita Shukla, who's actually been very, very cooperative and has been one of the most active secretaries in helping us actually come to this final conclusion. This is a very, very important sector. Recall, we export almost over $40 billion of chemicals. People don't realize how big this sector is. This is far bigger than automobiles. This is far bigger than the traditional things which we think India is associated with: jute, cotton, tea, coffee. They're all less than $1 billion. This is a $40 billion sector, which is larger than even Chemcial GDP. So that is the size of the sector. In fact, on most parameters, it is either the third or the fourth largest export category after engineering goods and maybe petroleum products as an export group as far as India is concerned. We are a major producer of chemicals. Unfortunately, we are also a major importer of chemicals. So when we export over $40 billion, $45 billion of chemicals, we import $75 billion of chemicals. So we are actually net about minus $30 billion. The second is, this is a fast-growing sector. I mean, chemicals, both organic as well as inorganic, are a part of our life almost in everything we do. Plastics is something that's more visible, but in an invisible way, they pervade our life everywhere. Even if you're taking a medicine, the capsule, the cover, which is there on the capsule, is actually a chemical product. So it's a very huge sector. I mean, if you're wearing shoes, the shine on the leather that is there is coming out of it. It's also a very granular industry. There's nothing called chemicals as one common thing. Chemicals are largely organic, inorganic, but even that, you have specialty chemicals, you have bulk chemicals, there are agrochemicals. There are 5, 6 major subgroups of chemicals. They are very, very strong in some, they are not very strong in some. We do have some disadvantages. We are a major oil importing nation. Crude oil is almost 80-85% of imports. So there is a downstream to that which is petrochemicals, for which we end up, not having the inherent strengths of being a crude oil producer. So there are oil-producing countries which will have some advantages, but in the long run, we'll also become major petrochemical producers because now there are more technologies which will bring directly from crude to petchem. These are new things. So this effort has been to actually try to figure out what are what I would call unlocks to make India big ticket. That has been the attempt in all the GVC studies which India has produced. So we looked at electronics. We were very good in mobile production. The PLI was a success. But we looked at how do you unlock the rest of the electronics value chain. We came up with an electronics report on GVCs and electronic components. It's become a 20,000 crore scheme of the ministry. And it's not PLI alone. CapEx, OpEx, infrastructure, skilling, all of that. And that program is a hit. And it came at such an opportune time that just when geopolitical tensions were rising, India had a scheme ready. So you will see in the next 2 years a gradual shift of the entire electronics ecosystem in India. The second report which was released was on auto components. We are very, very big in automobiles. But let me tell you, very few Indian companies actually own the engine technology. Be it aeroplanes or ships or submarines and even automobiles. We still don't control the engine technology. And the second is transmissions. And that's very, very important, and that's where a lot of value is hidden. So that's what our auto components report actually focused on. The department has been tasked to go ahead and complete a study on that. This is the third in the series. We picked up very big ticket sectors. Following this, we'll be coming out with something in textiles, if I'm not wrong. and maybe one or two more which are there. The details I will not go into, but the analysis has led us to some mega unlocks if you do that. One, a lot of these will be port based, because otherwise you do a lot of transshipment. So pick up some mega clusters for developing. Two, you will need solid connecting infrastructure there. Third, you will need some OpEx support to get over some handicaps which India has. And then of course the usual stuff, you need people skilled and trained in managing all this, and then 4-5 other suggestions are there: ease of doing business, clearances, because chemical industries tend to be presumed to be polluting. So you will have to have pre-clearances. The suggestions I think will be there in the presentation. The goal is in the long run. I mean, even today when we export 40 billion, this is a 1.5 trillion traded good in the world. So we can see how small we are, 3%, less than 3%. The goal is actually to raise India to at least 10% in the long run. Very, very ambitious goal, so that when we actually become Viksit Bharat, we are talking of actually taking it to be a $1 trillion sector. A $1 trillion sector is not an insignificant sector. Even if India becomes a $30 trillion economy, a $1 trillion take is 3.5%. That's a very large part of the Indian economy. That is the goal. And we are hopeful that after the release of the report, the ministry will probably carry it forward with the support of the rest of the government. I think it will probably get converted into some programs which will then fructify in the near future. India is ideally placed right now, given where the world is, both economically as well as geopolitically. India is in a sweet spot. We are right at the heart. Everybody is looking, how will India respond to all this and attract manufacturing to India? It is a goal. Budget last time announced a national manufacturing mission. And we expect chemicals to be a major part of national manufacturing mission. And then we hope that this will actually generate interest in the entire chemicals world outside India to look at India as a very interesting and favorable destination. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your valuable insight and the perspectives that you have given us on this sector. Now I would request Shri Ishtiaq Ahmed, Program Director, Niti Aayog, to make a presentation on the key findings and recommendations of the report.
Thank you, Ashita. The share of just 1% in exports in 2000, it rose to 3% in 2023, but our imports rose to 5%, so we have a trade deficit. On the other hand, if you look at China, it has the export of just 6% in 2000, and now it has a share of 23%. Their imports have also risen, but from 6 to 12% only. So they are one of the biggest exporters of chemicals. So our top import partner is again, China is the top import partner, where we are exporting from around 34%, followed by Southeast Asian countries and United States. So it has resulted in a trade deficit, and though we are also making substantial exports, that's $44 billion, not a small number, it's a good number. We have established players. What we need to do is to reduce the imports and also scale up our exports. So where from these imports are actually coming? So if you look at these buckets of chemicals, in the inorganic chemicals, the most of the import is coming phosphoric acid, then compounds of precious metals, then anhydrous ammonia. They make almost around 40% of the imports are coming from this. And if you look at the plastics and articles thereof, so PVC and polypropylene and LDPE, they make around 15%, 8% and 7% respectively for import. So these are the top imported articles in the different groups, and majorly the imports are coming from inorganic chemical category and plastics and articles thereof. Next. So now I go component wise. So as I mentioned in the earlier slide, plastics and articles thereof, they are contributing to around $15 billion of negative trade, and followed by then comes the organic chemicals and petrochemicals, and inorganic is also $7 billion. Overall, we were net zero in 2000, where our imports and exports are equal, but now we are a deficit of $31 billion when it comes to trade. 85% of our propylene is converted into polypropylene. Though the global average is 70%, similarly ethylene 75% is converted into polyethylene. Though the global average is 63%, similar story is with the benzene and butadiene. So what is happening that we are typically manufacturing these bulk chemicals and we are not going into the quality derivatives, the chemical sector where much of the value lies. So that is one area which has been identified. Next. And this is slightly dense side but very, very important slide. We have benchmark for most CPIRs from Jurong, which is in Singapore. If you look at Jurong, it is just 32 square kilometers, but if you look at the performance, it has got 3 lakh crore of investment, packer capacity is very high, the top anchor investors are there, the master plan completed, it's running, everything is at high. And when it comes to our PCPR, we have far more larger area as far as the PCPIR are concerned. The head has 465 square kilometers, then Paradip has 275, Isaac is a large, but there is a moderate investment only. There is progress when it comes to the implementation of the project. There is inadequate infrastructure. There is a poor feedstock availability, and also production per unit is very, very low. And as far as this Tamil Nadu project is concerned, it has been kept on hold. Vizag has not just been taken off, and Paradip has started working. So only project which has actually succeeded is the health. Paradip is likely to succeed. In Vizag, lot of work needs to be done, and this Kudapur and Nagapatnam, this needs to be started. So what are the challenges of the chemical sector? Number one is the feedstock availability, because we have limited essential raw material. We have this heavy reliance on import. There is infrastructure deficit, not only in terms of the actual clusters and PCPR, but also on port infrastructure also. There are regulatory bottlenecks. We have lot of delays when it comes to environmental clearances. Innovation and R&D, we invest around just 0.7% in R&D, so the average of the chemical company is spending R&D is 2.3%. There is still shortage also. So around we have this 30% shortfall of skilled professionals in the sector. Now I come to the policy recommendations. First is on infrastructure. So on infrastructure, we are making two important suggestions. One is development of new chemical sectors, and other is revamping the existing PCPIR. So we have identified 6 new chemical clusters which could be developed with greenfield project. That's Sagar in the west, Dakshin Kannada, Ernakulam in the south, Panipat and Balocra, Bamer in north, and Pur Medinipur in east. These are the 6 new clusters which have been identified that could be developed as greenfield project. When it comes to revamping of the existing PCPIRs, what we are suggesting, a slightly restructuring of the institutional mechanism we have. Currently, what is happening is a high power committee which is chaired by cabinet secretary. It's responsible for strategic oversight, implementation, monitoring, regulatory integration, and there is a management board below that, which is responsible for master planning. That management board is at the cluster level. It is responsible for master planning, infrastructure development, investment facilitation, and operational coordination. But the fact is that only Gujarat has this management board, but not the cluster level, it is the state level. When it comes to other PCPIR, these state industrial bodies are doing too many other things and also doing this part. What we are proposing is that there should be empowered committee chaired by Secretary DCPC, and that committee should be identifying financial and non-financial initiatives to be undertaken in these PCPIRs, and there should be chemical GBC fund to take care of the infrastructure gap, and there should be administrative body at a hub level, and its functions are marketing and attracting investors, investment screening, land allotment, lease management, management of shared facilities, and facilitating regulatory clearances. intervention we are proposing is on port infrastructure. So this chemical sector is very high volume sector. So we need to have large handling facilities at the port. We have so far constraints when it comes to the handling, insufficient storage capacity, limited mechanization, and also inadequate last mile connectivity. What we are proposing is that there should be a committee comprising of MOPSW, DCPC, and terminal operators, private as well as the government, and industry and safety experts. They should be working on it to take forward modernization of these ports, because we do need to improve the port infrastructure. That's very, very critical for the chemical industry. So we have also identified 8 clusters which could be developed, and those could be very important for the chemical industry. These are Gujarat cluster, North Maharashtra cluster. These are being plot in the map. And South Maharashtra and Goa cluster, Karnataka cluster, West Bengal and Odisha cluster, North Andhra Pradesh cluster, South Andhra and Tamil Nadu cluster, and South Tamil Nadu and Kerala cluster. These are the 8 port clusters which have been identified for modernization and improvement in the infrastructure. So when it comes to manufacturing in the country, there is a cost disability which India has. So we need to incentivize production. That's the OpEx support sector needs. So we have conducted a very intense exercise when it comes to the identification of the product which could be given the OpEx support based on the import dependency, export potential, single source dependency, in-market criticality, and strategic significance. By doing this exercise, we have identified 124 chemicals which could be given OpEx support, and these are in 5 groups: agrochemical intermediaries, pharmaceutical intermediaries, battery and electronic chemicals, dyes and pigments, petrochemicals, and multimedia. These are the categories, and we are proposing that they should be given OpEx support for a limited period of time. So when it comes to the R&D, fourth intervention, we are proposing the R&D support. And as I mentioned earlier, we are spending less when it comes to research and innovation, just 0.7%. And small companies are not able to take up the projects of research. So there is a fund which is with the DST. So we are proposing one interface agency between which would be comprising the DST, the private sector, and BCPC, so that they could do the early stage validation of the research projects, evaluate them, and actually catalyze the dispersal of the research grants to them. And this could be covering the TRL 4 to 5, from TRL 4 to 5 to TRL 9. And also we are proposing that there should be certain unlocks which should be happening by having this technology collaboration with the foreign players, so that we can bring technology in the country. So these are the, we have also identified some of the areas which could be taken up for the research, and these have a lot of potential. For instance, if you look at this titanium dioxide, we have so much of illuminate in the country. That with chlorine can be made into a titanium dioxide, but we don't have the technology. This kind of project should be incentivized for research and development. So we have identified these 11 areas which could be incentivized for research and development. So when it comes to the environmental clearances, its standard time is 255 days, but what's happening is that 90% of the cases we have the environmental delays, and average delay is 194 days, and maximum delay is 1,000 days. So there is a delay which is happening in the environmental clearances, and that's to a certain extent because it involves the security and the safety of the individuals and also ecology. Therefore, due care has to be taken when it comes to environmental clearance, but also it should be given in time, because factoring all those things, 255 days of limit has been mandated. So to improve this state of affairs, what we are proposing that there should be a committee which could be set up in DPIP just to monitor the timeline. It should work with the MOEFCC. Secondly, there should be this autonomy to EAC, because they are the committee who decide largely on environmental clearances. They should not go for repeated validation by EIA. Then the companies which which are going for just for capital expansion where product mix is changing but no public hearing is required, they could be allowed to have construction activities to a certain extent. And pre-embedded environmental clearance should be given in new projects. And lastly, where there is no increase in pollution load due to product mix changes, fresh environmental clearance may not be needed. Then comes the FTAs part. So we have 14 FTAs and recent ones are with Australia and UAE. So FTAs are very important when it comes to the trade. But what has happened that it has led to imports, and some of the products where we could actually build capacities have been actually imported. So it is resulting into a value chain weakness. So what we are proposing that there could be protections like tariff quotas are maintaining tariffs on finished products, and also when we are negotiating fresh FTAs, there should be provision for the chemical industry. And also some of the smaller players, they are not aware of the FTAs being in place, so they are not able to take the advantages. So more awareness about the FTAs is also needed. So last of the interventions are in respect of talent and skill upgradation. So there is limited industry aligned training when it comes to industry. There is low enrollment in the ITIs, there is underdeveloped infrastructure, and high attrition and weak upskilling. And so what we are proposing that there should be expansion of ITIs and specialized training institutes. There should be upgrading of faculty and teacher training, and there should be more and more academy industry partnership. Now with these policy interventions, now I come to the expected outcome. So we have two categories, there are two slides. One includes fertilizers and other chemicals. So including that, presently the sector is around $200 billion. With these interventions, with a growth of around 9 to 10% per annum, it is expected to reach around $400 to $500 billion by 2030, and by 2040 it should be a $1 trillion sector, including fertilizers and others as well. Yes. Excluding fertilizers and others, presently the sector is around 130 billion dollars. It can reach up to 250 to $300 billion. What presently we have GDC participation of just 3 to 3.5%. By 2030 it will reach to 5 to 6%. Presently its sector is around 100 to 110 billion. It will go around 280 or $300 billion. India trade, presently we have a trade deficit of $31 billion. We should be net zero in 5 years' time, and it will lead to additional employment of 7 lakh people. Thank you. I conclude here.
Thank you, Department of Chemicals and Petrochemicals, Ma'am Nivedita Shukla, Varma, to kindly address the gathering.
Thank you. Good afternoon, sir. At the outset, sir, I would like to say my thanks to you and niti aayog for having taken up this sector, because it's a very important sector, and a very thorough and detailed analysis has been done in this report with your guidance, and I'm sure this is going to help the chemical industry in many ways, and it will take the chemical industry quite far. At the risk of repeating things, sir, it's a known fact that chemical industry is a very big industry, and its products are used in almost all other industries, so very widely used products. There are about 80,000 products that the chemical industry produces. It has been doing reasonably well, and it's a resilient industry. It has maintained a growth rate of about 6% in the last 30 years. And especially agrochemical and dyes sectors have done well in the sense that their exports are quite good. But it's a very diverse sector, sir, from big industries producing polymers to smaller industries producing plastics are there. Then there are inorganic chemicals, organic chemicals, speciality. So it's a diverse industry, and one prescription cannot fit all the segments. But still, while we were making the plan for the next 25 years, we identified the potential of the industry, and we had kept the goal of focusing on increasing the manufacturing activity to reach the goal of reaching $1 trillion by 2040 and $300 billion as soon as possible. Uh, Different segments also aspired to increase their manufacturing activity as well as exports. Uh, but I would say that despite doing well and despite being 3% of the global markets, there are challenges. If we were to reach $1 trillion by 2040, it wouldn't be easy, and there are challenges. This report has captured this fact very well, that despite the products being used widely, we have to focus on exports because the domestic industry and domestic usage has its limitations, and that kind of goal cannot be reached without focusing on the exports. That will also help bridge the gap that the imports and exports have in this sector. So this report has brought it out very well. It has brought out the challenges being faced by the industry in the road to that goal also very well. While we face the shortage of raw material, the infrastructure also needs to be created. Some work has been done, as brought out by Mr. Ishtiaq. TCPIRs have slowly built a lot of infrastructure like roads, railways, even ports, but perhaps the industry-specific infrastructure was not focused upon, sir, which is required now. This report has brought out that also. Then we have lack of know-how or technology. So department has tried to promote research and process improvement in small ways through COEs in the past, but bigger initiatives were also required, and we have circulated an EFC note right now for that, but perhaps this report will help us improve upon that also, so that it could be made more useful for the industry. In the past, we have sir, made a scheme for chemical hubs, but perhaps more improvement was needed, so it could not go through. So I am sure all these aspects, including the OPEX support that the industry requires, everything has been dealt with in detail in this report, and it will help address all these challenges in a very, very methodical way and in a very comprehensive and integrated way. Right now, whatever was happening was that each segment was looking at their own industry, and perhaps the efforts that the department was making were also very segmented. So this comprehensive analysis and comprehensive report will help us chart a roadmap which I am sure would help the entire industry and help it utilize its full potential and reach its goal. At the end, sir, I would again like to thank you for the initiative and the guidance that you have given during preparation of this report. And the department is grateful for this guidance, and I am sure we will be able to do whatever is required to take this project forward very quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, madam, for sharing your perspectives and input. Now I would like to invite Dr. Arvind Bimani, Honorable Member, Niti Aayog, to kindly share his remarks on the report.
Thank you. So, a very detailed and comprehensive report, as you can see from the presentation. Ishtiaq had to kind of run through it with barely hear what he's saying. Anyway, that's not a criticism, it's a comment. So, very commendable work by the team. I think, when I have interacted with chemical industry, they always, and many other large industries, they have asked me that what does the government think? I think it's very important to bring all this data and analysis into a single place so that all stakeholders kind of have a similar basis and also some projections. Every part of the chemical industry will have their own projections. It's not necessary that they will believe all the projections here, but I think it's important to have a starting base from which others can project. So I think that's a very important role that these studies play.
Uh, Thirdly, the diversity is huge, and I may be wrong, but I am often thought of chemical industry as an economist in two different segments of part. One is kind of capital intensive, where scale of production is very important, and the other is kind of skill intensive, where we talk about specialized chemicals, etc. Obviously, there's a whole spectrum, but just as a way of thinking. So when we think of the first part, the fragmentation means that demand is fragmented among lots of producers, so they are not able to come up to scale. One of the reasons for clustering was to bring facilities together so there can be a common scale which gives efficiency. So not to without. So I think there is an issue of whether you want to build more clusters or you want to develop the clusters which you have. I think so this is something you must keep in mind when you go forward, because I'm not sure that we still have the scale. So for example, you mentioned exports as a supplement. Why is that? Because that means that domestic demand, even the role of domestic demand, either because it's fragmented or for whatever reasons, is not enough to give you that scale. So one is the issues connected with scale, and the second one on skill intensive, clearly I think is a very useful for that this 30% you have quantified. So skilling is a great issue. It cuts across, but the substantive numbers, etc., I think it will be very helpful. So basically, at both the national and the state level where these clusters are, there needs to be a kind of tripartite mechanism, where government, whether it's national or the state, acts as a coordinator and brings the government, the colleges, the universities, the polytechnics, the ITIs together to do the skilling. I don't think this can be done just as a top-down, but I think what the central government can do is organize, help, advise the states to set in motion this process. And I found this myself in many other industries, that coordination and information sharing about demand and the suppliers is very important. Finally, on the choice, I mean, again, it's too much to grasp at just one point. I think you identified, I don't know, how many 40 different products or industries, but yeah. I think it's, there's two elements of this. One is the economic, which has to do with the demand and scale, which I talked about. The second is a combination of strategic, monopoly, critical, you want to say. And I recently came across a report which was done in China in 2018. They identified choke points. Okay, they were looking at it from their perspective. If foreigners have choke points, we have to look at it from our perspective. What are these choke points? We already know that certain chokes have been done on critical minerals, etc. So identifying these choke points in chemicals, I think is very important, where some of the subsidies will have to be directed. With that, I again commend the team for this work.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your expertise and insightful views on the subject. Now we move on to the much awaited part of the event, the launch of the report, which essentially outlines a comprehensive set of interventions to achieve the envisioned growth in India's chemical industry landscape. I now request our esteemed guest to kindly unwrap and reveal the report.
To find the chemical one first. Oh, it was right.
Now, to share deeper insights and provide valuable perspective, I would like to invite Shri Shivan Reddy, Honorable Vice Chairman of Niti Aayog, for his address.
Thank you, and thank all of you who are in this room, media in particular, for your interest in the work of Niti Aayog, government departments, stakeholders, and with whom there are many, and of course the Niti Aayog team. Let me personally thank Ishaq Ahmed, but also very much our CEO for what I think has been a transformative series of reports on global value chains. And as CEO has indicated, they were done in anticipation of where we are in the global economy at the moment. But I think that they land at a particularly important moment as people are rethinking supply chains around the world. What I would say is that the report is an extremely rich document. Now that it's released, I can talk about it in terms of case studies, in terms of much more detail than Ishtiaq was able to capture. And so I do hope that it gets the attention that it rightly deserves. My suggestion to CEO and to Ishtiaq would be that we might want to take this on the road, as it were, because this is something that is very much at the level of individual states. So both as a model of how such analysis should be done, and to provoke a dialogue in the states that have been designated over here. I would say that we shouldn't just leave it to Delhi. This ultimately is actionable in the states, and of course NITI has been working under CEO's leadership with the states through a number of mechanisms. So just a few comments. I would normally say I'm standing between you and Haiti, but I see Haiti is here, so I will just, and nonetheless, keep my remarks short so we can move on to the questions and answers. I guess one puzzle that arises in my mind, although as Secretary had indicated, it's not that the sector has been doing badly, but if you compare it to somewhere like pharma, with which it is quite closely associated, it doesn't seem to have been as much of a success story as pharma. Even though I was once told that in the case of pharma, one reason for India's strength was that India had a strength in chemistry. And I would have thought that the same kind of, if you like, intellectual strengths in chemistry ought to apply to petrochemicals, but apparently that's not so. So it's a bit of a puzzle. I don't know, because I haven't studied the report that carefully, to know whether there's much to be learned by the comparative performance of public sector enterprises and the private sector in this area, because both are present and both are present with some force. And so whether what economists would call issues of industrial organization, are important or not. I don't have a view on that, but there are many case studies, but I think, if it stimulates research, the question of whether the niches that the private sector chooses to inhabit versus the PSUs, that's a question that arises. Now, I think I really want to make three additional points. One is the question of the feedstock being indigenous, I think, is sort of irrelevant, and I say this out of, having spent my 4 years as chief economist to Shell, next to Rotterdam. So, basically, Shell had its biggest petrochemical refineries in Rotterdam. for all the reasons that are listed here. Efficiency, logistics, port handling, all of that. So I think one can say, and the example of Jurong here also illustrates that, those are, as it were, the bases in something as capital intensive as this for comparative advantage, rather than whether you have the feedstock. And this goes back all the way to when Japan and then Korea decided that they would set up heavy industries without having any, as it were, hydrocarbon resources at all. So, I think that's an element that I would discount. I think the second point I would make is that up till now, the so-called CBAM, the issue of, if you like, protective tariffs in importing markets to create a so-called level playing field, has tended to be focused largely on steel and cement. I don't know whether CBAM is also going to apply on the chemical sector. And so the question of who the recipient markets are going to be, and whether, in that sense, if you like, the greenness of the whole supply chain, how much of an issue that needs to be, and how that's going to shape, as it were, the direction of our exports. I think it may be in the report, but it is something to think about if we are preparing for the next 20 years. And my final point would be to probe a little bit more on the point Dr. Vimani made, which is the possible role of MSMEs in all of this, which is to say that there is a dualism in the sector. And since we're talking about global value chains and not just creating our own domestic policies, I assume, as was indicated with Jurong, that we are talking of anchor investors like the Shells, etc., of the world for the large scale. And I would just have a question of whether we or the ministry need to be more active in encouraging, as it were, the MSMEs of partner markets also to the sector. I was talking to somebody about Japan and China, somebody who knows Japan well, over the weekend, and he said India had 1,800 Japanese enterprises, China has 35,000. And so whether there is, a MSME play here for play for foreign MSMEs in this area, and I'm sure there are lots of German Mittelstand companies who must be very specialized in the area of petrochemicals. So that's another dimension. But we couldn't have started thinking about these things without the patient assembly in what I have to say is probably the best produced report, and we produced many, I've seen in a long time. So thank you and the team for, as it were, all the hard work that goes into something like this. But I would say this is the beginning of a journey and not the end. So thank you very much.
I'd like to add, thank you, Vice Chairman. Just one or two points. You see, what does the report say? Don't be separate, disaggregated, 8 concentrated. You can say India should have 8 Jurongs. That is what it says. I mean, if you read, there's a map of India, it tells you, 8 locations have been identified with the region. Focus on 124 chemicals. That is what will give you a big upside. Now they're distributed, there's no point reading the lists, but that is it. And 3, the employment potential, 1 million additional employment can be generated in the short duration of 5 to 7 years. When you have these concentrated locations, you have the big players, you have the medium player and the small player all in one neighborhood. A good example, we have small such cluster. You'll find Ankleshwar, Bharuch. It is a mini cluster. You have some large refinery, petrochemical and the downstream. But we need much bigger and many more, given the size of our economy. I mean, that's why we are importing so much. I think that is that. So that's what I thought I'll add value to, the question you raised, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
With your permission, I'll excuse myself.
Yeah, okay, fine.
Well, you may request congratulations and thank you so much.
Thank you everyone. On behalf of Niti Aayog, I would like to thank everyone here for joining us today for the launch of the proposed chemical industry housing India's participation in. I extend my appreciation to all the representatives from industry associations, press, officials from ministries and departments, and our leadership from Niti Aayog for their invaluable contributions. Thank you.